Welcome to Built for This. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. My podcast features captivating conversations with intriguing people who have found purpose in their lives through their career, family, or life experiences, and just why they were built for this. Through the stories that you will hear, I trust that you will be inspired and encouraged to find just what you were built for. So let's get started. And welcome again into the studio for another edition of Built for This. And again, another great opportunity and pleasure to be able to join to the show today a longtime friend who has been in the broadcast industry a long time, coaching people on the air, both sides of the microphone. But Dave Shore is my guest today. And Dave, thanks so much for jumping in on the show today.
Hey, Brian, good to see you. I love what you're trying to do and what you've been doing here because, Built for This, everybody's got their own kind of steps that they took, and they've all got a story, and we love stories, right? We
do love stories. And I want to hear your stories, and a lot of those. You do have a lot of stories. So and there's so much ground I want to cover. Your time with ESPN, radio, television in Dallas, Los Angeles, and now you're in North Carolina doing a lot of great things nationally. Certainly on for all of us who are sports fans and broadcast fans. But let's go all the way back to how you started this, coming out of college there in the Midwest and following some great teams in the Illinois, Indiana area. But what was it that caught your fancy early on that you thought, I think I want to do this broadcast thing? What was it that really spoke to you back in the college days?
Yeah, for some reason, I think it was like age 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten that as a gift, one of those almost like a PA system, but it was a microphone.
Sure.
With the, you'd carry around the big speaker and the amplifier on it. But, I'd always just, I didn't have any brothers or sisters at home to play around with. And we lived out in the country. So I guess I just got used to just kind of putting on little shows all by myself and just kind of talking through games and everything like that. And I just, I caught the bug and went to college for it and immediately started in television news. So, so many young people that I talk to now, they've got so many elements around them. But as you well know from your growing up years as well, we didn't have as many. We didn't have digital platforms. We didn't have social media. So sometimes it looks like it's pretty bare bones the way we all started in broadcasting.
Well, we're going to go down your career path, but talk a little bit about what you're doing right now. I know you're very passionate about this pretty new and current opportunity you have to try to teach young aspiring broadcasters. I mean, from high school kids or even the age like you're talking about, young kids that want to become a broadcaster and work in radio or television. But you're with a group now. One of the many things you do, but one of the things you do is with a group that brings in aspiring broadcasters to a boot camp, and get to work with them. And you have some great people that work around you. And what is your passion there in trying to pass along to young kids trying to do what you're doing?
Well, the CAN Advisory Broadcast Talent Coaching colleagues that I have, they're just, they're just like myself. We were blessed to be in the business a long time. And so getting a chance to talk to both current broadcasters of all experience levels, and then more importantly, try to see if we can give a head start to some of the young ones out there, because once they're in college, they have no idea what's coming up next.
Yeah.
And so we do have mid-April. The Portsmouth Invitational Tournament has been going on since 1953. It's kind of an NBA draft prep camp where the NBA scouts and GMs all take a look at guys right before the NBA draft in June. And so it's a good chance to have something that young people, we're going to teach them, but we're going to let them cover a live event and really understand what it's like to maybe do an interview with a player or a coach or a scout and understand what it's like to do that while they're in college, or maybe some of them are coming out of high school with experience. So it's really amazing the opportunities that they have. And I think that everyone just needs that kind of little boost and success story, almost kind of a how you built this kind of thing, just like you're doing right now, is tell us your secret, and the secret sauce is different for everybody. But the one thing that you do need is you need experience, and you know that.
Yeah. And I know you had a chance, I think I read somewhere when you were still in college and you got credentialed to go to, some professional sports events. So When you're talking to some of these kids or some of the people that you bring into these camp, um, what are the things that you're trying to, I guess, teach these kids or give to them that you didn't have the opportunity, but now you have a chance with these wonderful people around you that you can give them a little bit of a, as you mentioned just a minute ago, give them a little bit of a boost, either in their self-confidence or their self-awareness, personally and professionally, that you can give them that maybe you didn't have a chance to get that when you were going through it?
Yeah, I think, I think there's so many more opportunities. There's a chance to record yourself on YouTube.
Mm.
But I think more than just being a personality, you've got to be around people. And so I tell a lot of the students, don't be afraid to ask. The worst answer that you could possibly get is no, we're not going to let you come and be around this experience. Mine was 1986. And my university in Indiana, a smaller university named Anderson,
Right.
was just 30 miles north of Indianapolis. So the Indiana Pacers were nice enough. The PR director actually gave me a press pass, and I was smart enough, at least then, to say, wow, they're giving me a pass. I'm going to continue to request it. And I think I must have gone to like 50 or 60 home games over the next couple of years. And they would actually let me bring the broadcast equipment, sit on media row, and actually record myself doing play-by-play with an analyst. And we could run it on like tape delay back on our college station later on. It was just an experience of a lifetime that maybe college and high school kids aren't going to get a chance to do now, but there's other ways of doing it, because right now, a lot of teams, a lot of organizations, a lot of leagues are recognizing that people are in different types of platforms. So, I just say, try to do something that others won't think about doing. And sometimes that's just kind of going the extra mile.
Yeah, I was going to just kind of follow up on that a little bit, Dave. As long as I've known you, and it's been a long time, you're a very motivated kind of person. But is that one of the things that you try to pass along to some of these younger kids? When you had that opportunity to go to the Pacers games, and here you are at college age, and an incredible opportunity that probably some, like you just said, would never get that opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's half the battle within yourself, within your heart, within your mind, that if you're going to go down this road or this road of life, whatever you're doing, that you've got to make the commitment and you've got to do the hard work to do it, and which is what you did.
Yeah, I mean, some majors, some industries are going to rely on you to be more book heavy, right? And do a master's program. But this one, you really need to you need to feel confident. You need to be a good speaker. And that confidence comes in just asking and being very inquisitive. Much like yourself, Brian, I think, many of us will say that the reason why we stayed in the media, either as a reporter or an anchor for so many years for myself, was because I always grew up inquisitive, wondering, how's that work? Why does that work? What are you interested in? And so I go back to those Indiana Pacer days, and I was just smart enough to know what I was doing a little bit, but then not smart enough to know that other people weren't going up and asking some of these players. I asked Kareem Abdul-Jabbar one thing when the Lakers came through town, and all of a sudden, all the other media members came up to me afterwards, and they were like, "What did he tell you? What did he tell you?" They said nobody ever talked to him. And so I just went up as like, a college kid and started asking him some questions. And years later, when I was in LA, he's sitting in my office, and I told him that story. I was like, you probably don't even remember. And honestly, he gave me some stuff that today would have made social media headlines.
Yeah.
Like, talking about, being around the wrong type of people, making investments with his money and everything. And so I learned so much. Charles Barkley used to sit around before the game and talk to the media about his thoughts on politics.
Wow.
Back when he was a player.
Yeah.
And so, all the beat writers would just stand there, and here I am just kind of standing there listening to him talk about politics in the 1980s. And so here we are, with all kinds of media out there, and we weren't running off and sharing it on Instagram back in the 80s.
No. Well, let's fast forward then past that. I think our past first cross in the Dallas market. I'm at Texas Motor Speedway, and you're at ESPN Dallas. We'll talk a little bit about that experience when you have a chance to come here and you're on air, but you're also programming that radio station, and you're eventually going up against, you talk a little bit about the radio wars. Something called The Ticket was on the air, and here's ESPN radio coming into the market for the first time and battling those two stations right there. But what were those days like in Dallas radio?
Well, you know what? You're telling people how to build stuff, and so
Yeah.
take away the broadcast part of it, but just understand that ESPN owned and operated. ESPN Disney owned and operated that station when we launched it in 2001, thanks to Scott Masteller, who was first hired there, and then he brought me shortly after. But we had a game plan that you had to stick to, and if you were going to be a competitor of anyone, let's say any of you are looking to start something, a store or whatever in your area there, you're going to do a market research. And the market research showed us, don't try to be the Ticket.
Yeah.
That there's enough of a fan base out there to do what you would do. You stay in your lane, let them stay in their lane. And I thought it was an incredible thing to do. And by the way, nobody was doing FM sports talk either. So
Right.
we were one of the first FM sports talk stations. But you had to kind of keep your head down, do a credible job that was more along the line of what ESPN was trying to do, and then just know that people are going to go back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think it worked for a while, and unfortunately that station didn't stay around Dallas, but I think it did open up for another sports talk station to come around and really let us all see that is just an amazing sports market.
Mm-hmm. You've done a lot of, or you do a lot of media coaching and some executive coaching, helping people deal with the media or work within a business structure and that kind of thing. And you have so much experience in the boardroom, and again on either side of the microphone. What'd you learn about yourself when you were thrust into that situation? I mean, I know later on after you go to Los Angeles and then you have another opportunity where you need to get a station on in about 3 months at the next stop. But what'd you learn about yourself, Dave? Maybe beyond a broadcaster, but just as a person and working with others, and like you said, a game plan about life and about business.
I think first of all, you mentioned it. Having a game plan is one of the most important things. Second of all, is understanding the characteristics that you need to keep. And I think that one thing that was always important to me, and I hoped that I would be kind of a breaker of sports news there in both the Dallas area and some other areas that I went to. And to do that, you can never compromise your own credibility. So I think that one of the things that I really enjoyed about traveling with the Cowboys or the Mavericks or during those years was trying to break stories alongside some of the real classic great journalists in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but understanding that I was going to try to do it through relationships, but at the same time, you have to maintain your credibility. You never get that back. And I think, sometimes people lose that in the world of entertainment. They think that, okay, sports talk show hosts or whatever, they can say whatever they want. News talk show hosts can do that. But, there does come a time, especially if you're in the field, that you have to have that credibility. And if you lose it, you're never getting it back. And so I try to tell that to young people, especially those who are trying to maybe be a little different, maybe be a little unique. You can be unique. You can have your personality, but you just can never, lose that credibility.
I know you've had a chance to speak to a number of journalism and media classes there in North Carolina, where you're based, and at other places just in the business world. But expanding a little bit on that credibility idea, when you talk to executives or anyone in the business world, either you're coaching them or you're teaching young broadcasters, that how paramount that really turns out to be. I mean, a lot of people can maybe get stories out there if you're on the media side, but how credible they might be, or if they had to damage relationships to get there. But if you can talk a little bit more about the long-term effects of building that kind of a reputation and credibility in a person's life, and how it pays huge dividends, and no matter whatever you turn out to be.
Yeah, I think, it's just, for me, I try to share, if young journalists ask, or young broadcast personalities, if they ask, I try to give them an idea, because if I share an example that worked for me, it's not about, hey, look at me. It's really just a fact that I experienced this. I hope if I did make a mistake that I can try to prevent somebody from going down that road before. But it's I can't overemphasize how good it is now that we have all these digital platforms like YouTube and Spotify and Apple and everything like that. But then again, once again, it puts that responsibility and that credibility first and foremost in your mind. And so I think one of the biggest things that I realized was you don't even realize who's listening or who's watching, right? And I think that's what's great about in the content business. Fast forward to when I was in Los Angeles, and a lot of times, like the late Kobe Bryant would tell me that he was listening on the way home after the game, or would refer to something I said, and that I just couldn't believe it. That people that were in the business were so intent on listening to it. And you think back to those days in Dallas. I mean, I ventured into the world of auto racing back in the 90s, thinking that not many people were doing it. I was going to try to become a little bit better, a little bit more knowledgeable at it. And, that was a really, really tough task. When we did all those pre-race shows out at Texas Motor Speedway, you have to know what you're doing. You have to be able to ask smart, intelligent questions. And, I used to thrive on that kind of thing. I didn't consider myself an expert in it, but I was going to make sure that I didn't make a mistake at it. So those are kind of the things that I share. And what's interesting though, is a lot of the classes that I talk to, half the group wants to be behind the scenes and half wants to be on the air. It used to be everybody wants to be on the air.
Right.
And you'd have to kind of, give them the bad news that, hey, you're probably going to need to be a producer first and just be in the right place at the right time, be there on a holiday when somebody needs you. But, it's really nice to see a lot of people wanting to be involved somehow in the production of things.
Mm-hmm. And obviously that is such a huge part for, shows like this couldn't come off without a great production team that I have.
You got a team there.
I have here. But that is half or more the battle than the talent side of it now. Because of, as you mentioned, so many platforms are out there that you're going to be seen or heard on, that technically it's got to be there. You mentioned Kobe. You have a who's who list of people that you've interacted with through your pre and post game shows with both in Dallas and Los Angeles and on the national scene with ESPN. But I'd love you to talk a little bit about, I think it's when you were in Dallas, but you had the opportunity to work on the Texas Tech basketball broadcast during the time when the great legendary Bob Knight was there. What was your relationship with one of the legendary coaches that we've ever seen?
Well, you know what? I always try to give a shout out to somebody who made that possible. And a lot of our mutual friend is Greg Elkin there in the Dallas area.
Right.
Greg, had been with Coach Knight at Indiana back in the day, and when Coach asked him if there's somebody that could do his TV broadcast and do play-by-play, I think that he wouldn't mind being around. Greg dropped my name, and I'll never be more grateful. I finished out the last 5 years of going just in and out from Love Field to Lubbock, back and forth to do some of the home games, but there's just nothing like it, because for some reason I just got those fortunate years where Coach was towards the end, and I just saw some incredible things. He would basically wonder where I was if we got done with the game and I put the headset down and I wasn't already back sitting next to him in the locker room, watching SportsCenter or something. So there was just, I love seeing people like that and how they made their decisions and how they went about their business. And yeah, I'll defend a lot I saw during those years, but I won't defend or don't need to, to talk about anybody's career that I didn't see, before that. So I remember in his latter years, he was still giving me a call, and I think I learned a lot from Coach Knight.
Well, I was going to ask you, that was my next question. I mean, everyone has a perception of Coach Knight from both when at Indiana, but he certainly elevated the Texas Tech program to a national level as soon as he arrived on the scene there. But in the 4 or 5 years that you had a chance to work with someone of that caliber, what did you learn about him that maybe people didn't ever really get to see? Here you are after the broadcast or after the game is over, you're able to spend the time with Bob Knight. Anything particular that stands out and what you take away from your relationship with him?
Two funny things. First, well, one funny thing. One is that, my seat was like right next to the
Right.
bench a lot of
Yes.
times to call the games, and most people would only see on camera him yelling at a referee, and not until I was down there with him. And then I asked him later on, he was like, I'm glad you saw that I'm actually yelling that they didn't call traveling on my own team. I mean, he was playing the side on both sides to try to get. Now, granted, people will say that maybe he went about it in his own way, but
Yeah.
nobody would know because they weren't really miking him during that time, that a lot of times he was yelling just to keep the calls, balanced. The
Yeah.
other thing is, a lot of times he'd get on the phone when we were in the locker room and he would call somebody that back in the day we would have thought was an old rival. So, for example, I grew up in Champaign, Illinois. I was an Illinois fan. And of course, Illinois hated Indiana. But so his rival was Lou Henson at Illinois.
Mm.
Well, later in Lou's career, when he was down in New Mexico, he was ill. And Coach Knight was picking up the phone, calling Lou, see how he was doing, have a laugh. And he did that with so many people in the latter part of his career. And I could just tell he quit in the middle of the season. He retired in the middle of the season after he had the record. And I could just tell. Dan Patrick had me on the next day, and I said last night, I said he asked me to go down and knock on the official's door and see if they'd want to go after the game to Hooters. And we sat there. Coach would have a fish sandwich, and we laughed for like three hours after the restaurant closed. And then the next day he announced that he was retiring. So, I could just kind of start to see in his mind that the game had changed. Some coaches are really good at adapting to today's young people, but he really would have struggled in this day and age with NIL because that puts so much pressure on coaches. But once again, just learned so much. Bill Parcells in Dallas and Don Nelson and of course Phil in Los Angeles. I loved watching the coaching element a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Phil Jackson, the former head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers, I have several questions out there. First of all, how did the opportunity come about to go to California, ESPN, and move out there and be heavily involved with the Lakers? Of course, you also were covering the Dodgers and other things. But how did the LA move come for you?
Well, there was 3 years in between when I met you, and I spent my time in Dallas before LA, and that was coming over here to North Carolina to start a sports radio station in Raleigh, North Carolina, and make it hopefully make it a successful ESPN affiliate. And then ESPN asked me to come back as an employee and be a part of the management team there in Los Angeles 3 years later. So, I went out there to be on the Lakers broadcast, and so I hosted the pregame and did sideline reporting for all the Laker broadcast. And, just a very unique market, after being in Dallas and seeing what a tremendous microscope there is on the Cowboys and the Rangers and everything. You go out to LA and it's a totally different type of sports radio to program because A, it's on AM along with like 125 other stations. And B, sports is important, but your personalities have got to be, entertaining and carry it. So, but they love their teams. I mean, you do not go wrong if you're talking about the Dodgers or the Lakers, when it comes to that time of the season. So huge loyalty to their players and to the stars there that they loved. But a very, very unique market. So I enjoyed my time and especially to see the end of Kobe and Phil's career while I was there.
Speaking of Kobe, so the tragic loss of Kobe Bryant and his young daughter aboard the helicopter, and then I think 7 others aboard there all lost their lives during that time. Kobe, as everyone's been well documented and everyone followed that, Kobe traveled a lot by helicopter while he was out there. But where were you that day, and when you got the news about one of the biggest sports tragedies of our lifetime?
He had I had talked to him a short while, maybe a few months before, just seeing if he was maybe missing basketball, but he was really, really enjoying his second career of being a businessman.
Yeah.
But I remember I was here in North Carolina, and I heard, and I immediately reached out to his head security guy, and he said, "Yeah, Dave, I'll have to get back with you, but this isn't good. I'm where he's supposed to be, and he's not." And obviously we know, later what happened. But it was shocking to know that was his daily form of transportation, and that something in this day and age could go wrong. I mean, that was a pilot that he was used to working with too. So, tragic loss, and tragic loss for everyone, because I knowing him, he was making sure everyone was comfortable, and he was giving them a ride so that they wouldn't have to battle traffic out there in Los Angeles. So just a sad thing. But I try to tell some of the stories that I witnessed while I was there, because a lot of times people think, well, they're pro athletes, they do this or that. But I saw him do so much good, just like I did in Dallas. I tell a lot of the young sports fans, I say Dirk and Kobe were the exact same in one way, and that is when we got to another city late at night, maybe 11 midnight, 10 o'clock, whatever, both of those guys, instead of going up to the room to play video games, they would grab a trainer and go off to whatever arena we were in that they were going to be shooting tomorrow. So I told him, I said, that's the crossroads of being a regular player and a superstar. Yeah. Right? The superstars, and Kobe would also have a full tub of ice put in by the hotel so that he could take care of his body and do an ice dump. And so, those were the things that I was fortunate to see. And he really enjoyed being around people and really helping the young players that came along too.
Now, you as a reporter, obviously they're very close with the Lakers when you're out there doing the pre-post game shows, but you're around the team all the time, just like you were with the Mavericks and Dirk Nowitzki and Kobe out there, Kobe Bryant with the Lakers. But as a reporter, Dave, and I think I know you well enough, and you kind of touched on it a little bit at the start here, that the style that you had or still have as a reporter and person of interest, and did you like to try to dig a little bit deeper into the players and get to know them more as a person than to just go up, put the microphone in their face and try to get a few quick sound bites, but to really get to know a Kobe Bryant or a Dirk off the court and find out that there would be much more of a story to tell that way?
Yeah, that was just always my philosophy. I think everybody has theirs. I know a lot of reporters in the Dallas area or Los Angeles that, they all have their own style. Mm-hmm. I happen to be around the facilities or these players a lot, almost every day. And so I just always had a philosophy that there'd be some days that I would just have no microphone with me. I wasn't going to stick it in front of their face. I was just going to stop by their locker, see how they were doing, see how their kid was doing, talk to them about something else going on in the world or another team that maybe they played for. And I wouldn't just do it with the stars. I got to know a lot of the backup people and the center and the left guard on the Cowboys. And, those would always help when after a tough loss, you've got to get someone to speak and that person, you could go up to a Greg Ellis or Brandon Noble there back in the 2000 Cowboys days. And you knew that they were going to shoot you straight because, you had really gotten to know them inside and out. And you had said hi to them on days when, most people were just hanging around the superstars. So that was always kind of a philosophy of mine, and it always worked out. And I feel like I met more interesting people, and I was interested in what they were up to and what they were thinking. And, many of them turned out to be coaches someday or in the front office. And so that really helped me.
So throughout the years of covering so many teams and from the 80s on, when you have seen the changes of technology and the changes in the industry, and you're trying to speak to colleges or high school kids that want to come along that way, what have you learned the most from the industry and from the changes that have helped you overcome a lot of challenges or get you to the point where you are right now in your career, to be able to pass on to other people, but also to be able to do and continue to elevate your own personal career? But this the changes that you've witnessed over
Yeah.
the last 30, 40 years.
Well, I think, there's so many elements there, Brian.
Yeah.
I think one of the things through the last many years here, still doing a lot of ESPN games,
Right.
I've worked with a lot of analysts, former players, and tried to help them. I really, really enjoy that because it's a real art, to be a former player or an athlete, and then somehow make that transition, like a Tony Romo or
Yeah.
you know others have done, because they have to be able to explain it to the common fan, but yet give them something they didn't know. Because now with the internet and social media,
Hmm.
the fans, they spend so much time consuming stats and data that you can't duplicate what a former player can do. They can. I'm If I'm the play-by-play person, I'm telling you what happened. They're telling you why it happened, and that why is so much different than when you and I are talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I really enjoy. And there's just so much access to games out there now. I know during my years at ESPN, it was just amazing to see women's softball, Little League, World Series. Just understand, why are the ratings going up on these things when you don't know any of these people?
Yeah.
And so it's been fascinating to see the rise of sports, I think, and it's everywhere. And so it puts a little bit more challenge on the broadcasters and the players themselves, I think, to kind of maintain that credibility and that reputation.
You mentioned storytelling, and young kids and everything. Like you said, always wanted to grow up to. I want to be the play-by-play person. I want to be in front of
Yeah.
the microphone and everything. But it seems like certainly with the advent and of all the digital platforms, that the art of storytelling is by far becoming much more important. When you like you said, when you take an analyst on a broadcast who paints a picture and details it and breaks it down what you just seen and maybe brings in some a little more flowery conversation into it and a descriptive thing, but the art of storytelling, that's got to be something that you try to pass along to young aspiring people that want to get into this business, which is really important. Being able to be a good communicator, but being able to tell the story to someone sitting on the other side of the radio or the streaming device or a camera who's not there.
Yeah. I met so many of those. And Brian, you've done a nice job with this. I know that you're
Thank you.
not strictly sports, but
Mm.
Bill Schoening, who I traveled around with, and we played San Antonio so many times.
Yeah.
That podcast was really nice that you did, and Brad Sham, and I tell a lot of the young people, don't try to imitate them, but understand why they were as great as they were. I remember his last season, Ben Scully. I was able to just go into the booth and stand behind him for several innings. And I'm so glad I did it, because it was his last season. And I just wanted to hear what these Dodger fans had heard all their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, just him, winding and telling a story that he would continue in the next half inning if he needed to. And I was fortunate here in Raleigh, the longtime play-by-play man of the Carolina Hurricanes, Chuck Caton, who used to be up in Hartford when they were the Whalers.
Mm-hmm.
He called radio play-by-play of hockey all by himself with no analyst.
Wow.
And so, to do that, to hear him or Brad Sham back in the day call the Final Four, for goodness sakes,
Mm-hmm.
the NCAA championship game, it's just a unique ability, and especially on radio, to describe what you're not seeing, but just so you can picture it in your head. And I just, we've all been blessed to see and hear so many great broadcasters that I get a little upset on social media when I see people, start to pull someone down. I just like them all. I
Yeah.
mean, because I think every play-by-play person is unique, and analyst is unique in their own way.
Well, other than trying to encourage young broadcasters, what's your busy schedule like these days? I know you're at a lot of college football games in the fall, but on the producing side or the talent side, it's keeping you as busy as you want to be right now.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I still want to talk, and I still want to help more talent, and I do enjoy going to NFL and NBA or college football games for ESPN. Still a lot of NFL.
Yeah.
Just so I can see, how the broadcast, how the rights have changed for all of these, and it's going to be very interesting, Brian, to see. This is what I tell young people: is follow the money. YouTube, I don't believe is ever going to go anywhere. It's only going to grow. Amazon and Apple, they're all making inroads, but some of these teams and leagues, they're starting to develop their own content streams.
Yes.
And it's going to be very, very interesting what happens in the future. I don't think sports and the love of it is going to go away. It's just we're going to have to continue to get creative in how we're presenting it. So I'm not going to leave the art of kind of being involved somehow, I think, on media platforms, just because I enjoy it so much, to see where we've come from. And now I'm kind of curious to see where we're going to go. Because everybody wants to have a podcast or they want to do something else, but are you being intriguing enough?
Yeah.
Let me tell you one thing, and that is the fact that back in News Talk days, when the late Rush Limbaugh, or in Los Angeles when I had Stephen A. Smith,
right?
People would be like, I didn't like that person, and I was like, I wanted to hug him because this is what we wanted.
Yeah, opinions.
We wanted half the audience to hate him and half love him, because that's what drove listenership. If everybody loved you, you're going to probably not have great ratings because you're just not stoking them enough to cause them to come back. So it's a very interesting concept of pushing buttons and finding talent who is both polarizing but yet very engaging, and is going to make you feel like they're your friend and that you need to come back to them each and every day. So I love that part of kind of coaching talent.
Yes, and you mentioned content. I know you have a podcast, The Game Plan, and it just seems like we're at a time where the consumption of podcasts now is just off the chart. I think you really nailed it on the head that it's got to be intriguing. The content has got to be something that's captivating, that's wanting to keep people to come back. But as you mentioned, it seems we're at a point in time with the advent, certainly of podcasting, where almost anybody can do it, but that we're at a time where people want to consume it as long as you have quality, your quality delivering to them.
Yeah, I think, the rating system is just as challenging as it was in radio and television.
Yeah.
Getting that accurate measurement, it's a little bit easier on podcasts because you can see how many views you have, but then you can't understand why somebody doesn't watch more than 5 minutes of it or whatever. And so I think we're in such a quick mentality that, I know, for example, your podcast, if I put that on when I'm at the gym, it's so much better. And that's the challenge that I think that live broadcasters have now, is that few people are in the same place at the same time every day. Like we used to, tune into my show at 10 a.m. Well, if you've got a meeting or you got somewhere else to be, you're not going to tune in at 10 a.m. So, I think the podcast we can carry anywhere. It's you can pop on at any time, to talk about something that's very important. And so, I think content is extremely interesting, and we're seeing that both, in the political world, and the sports world as well. So, and the weather, all news in general has really had to change and kind of reinvent itself over the years.
I want to talk about something that's, I know, is near and dear to your heart, and you've been involved with it for some time, certainly there in North Carolina, and it's the ALS Foundation, Lou Gehrig's disease. Talk about how you got attracted and involved there, and how you've helped that grow over the years that you've been involved.
It was just amazing because I was affected early in my media career by, my dear mom who raised me, had a very short battle with ALS and lost her battle at the age of 57. So,
wow.
It was well over 35, 36 years ago. And so I would just always, while I was in the media, just kind of try to volunteer any way I could with Muscular Dystrophy Association or ALS in any way. And unfortunately, about 6 years ago, I was able to serve as a COO and then later CEO of a statewide organization. But it was it was amazing. As much as I love sports and as much as I love content, it was amazing to see the challenges that every organization that is out there right now has in this landscape, with philanthropy being so high in need, but to understand how it operates, and then to see the research at the highest level, understanding that that these doctors and these researchers are trying as hard as they can, and then starting to see the diseases kind of have its similarities, that Alzheimer's and dementia and ALS and other neuromuscular diseases, with the researchers starting to talk to each other, they're starting to see that they do have some individual characteristics, but there may be a cause or a root cause down deep. So ALS, obviously Lou Gehrig, but so many others, and they were sports related. And so, we've seen so many former athletes lose their battle just because of either the head injuries or the high intense physical nature of it. Something is kicking that in. And so I'm so glad I got to see that world, and I still try to help out, on the awareness of ALS as much as I can. So thanks for asking. I think that someday, maybe all these things will be gone, but it's going to take still a lot of money and a lot of research.
Yeah. And I know I've been going at it for quite a while. I think the 10-year anniversary of the Ice Bucket Challenge was just a year or two ago. But for you, that hit really close to home. And now to be involved with something like this, but to go through that with your mom, how did that change you or affect you at such an early, young age, certainly even for you as a young man growing up? How did that change you to become the person that you're on now?
Yeah, I think just, having to go through it, and for anyone who's lost someone dear to them, you see what they go through, and you see how it affects, families in general. So I think you have to try to take something out of it. And I think empathy, I think understanding that that people have a lot going on in the world, and when they're battling and trying to help each other out on a family level. So it's just amazing when you see these families affected by this, and all of a sudden, and you see now, in of course, our sports landscape or entertainment world, it just is raised the profile when somebody, unfortunately, who is very popular, can use their platform to put in something good. We seem to lose someone in Hollywood to ALS almost every year. But it is nice to see that they're trying as much as they can to use their platform while they can. So I haven't enjoyed being a part of that, but I feel blessed that we can. The storytelling part is very important for anyone who's in the nonprofit industry.
Right.
So understanding how to tell your story, how to make the ask, and how to be a connector.
Yeah.
Hats off to everyone who's trying to raise money out there in the nonprofit world.
You mentioned the word empathy through that journey that you've been through, and I know you like you said, you're very involved in helping with the awareness through this nonprofit. But back to maybe one more question about the broadcast side, using empathy, and I was able to witness how you'd interviewed people, athletes, certainly out at Texas Motor Speedway, other sports venues, but could that be a little nuance you can pass along to aspiring broadcasters and how they approach athletes or how they approach people they want to interview in the entertainment business, that maybe showing a little empathy for what they may or may not know is going on with that athlete before, during, or after the game, and maybe rephrasing or looking how they want to do an interview or ask questions. It seems like that element might be something that's lost in a reporter's world in the last decade or so, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and I think that what you're trying to get at is just kind of the understanding and the perception of, you have to, one of the great things about those 6 seasons around the Lakers was I was in the huddle during a timeout, but at the half I had nowhere to go other than, walk around the front row seats at Laker games.
Yeah.
And
there's some good people sitting in those seats.
Half the celebrities, that I ended up getting a chance to know, it wasn't talking to them about what they do, like Joe Walsh of the Eagles. I I probably didn't talk one musical element with him for several times when we first got to know each other, because he was a ham radio operator. And so I was talking more about ham radio, and he was asking me what the Lakers were saying in the huddle, or David Beckham. I wasn't talking soccer with him. I was talking about, what the Lakers might do, or he was, mentioning something else. And so, half the time you could just, you got off onto a really, really good start, and you got to know people better if you just became interested in them. And so,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times you would hear that they were having struggles with, someone in their family or something. And, I just always enjoyed seeing that there were people that just had daily lives, even though they were superstars or whatever, they had daily lives. And that fascinated me more than, trying to get, a million followers on Instagram.
Yeah. Hey, does it give you the same reward now when you see someone you've say a young broadcaster maybe comes to one of your camps, or you've spoken to see them start to accelerate and grow in their life and their career, where you were when you were coming out of college there in the 80s, to see them be able to get their first chance? What does that do for you when you've invested, yourself into seeing somebody like that wanting to do what you do?
Yeah, I think it's, I tell people that I kind of say that we're in a very good generation now. I think that
Mm.
a lot of times, the older we get, we're the get off our lawn. No one does it like we used to do it kind of business. But, in the broadcasting world, some of the young broadcasters, and I call them young, but I had some of the first reps with guys like Adam Amin, who's on Fox,
Yeah.
Jason Benetti. And these young broadcasters, they started to come into the booth, or, meet me in whatever city we were going to do an MLB game or whatever. And, they had just called women's volleyball or women's softball the day before. And I thought, boy, these young broadcasters, they got it going on. And so, and so that they all work their craft and didn't just take it for granted. They all put in their dues. And so it's really nice now to see some of them bolt up to the, number 2 team or number 3 team on Fox, on NFL or something like that, because, you kind of know how hard they had to work.
Right.
And that's why I enjoy seeing the veterans, like some of the ones you've had on too, hang on as long as they can, just because they're still able to do it so much. I'll never forget the late great Pat Summerall right there in Dallas. He was our Cowboys insider on 103.3 for a couple of seasons, and I remember just working with him as just being an analyst, and he told me about the time that his biggest mistake was not taking stock. The first year him and John Madden did voiced over the Madden game, he took cash and John Madden took stock, and he goes, you see where that took him. So it's just funny to know that back in the day, he took the cash option and he don't want to do that.
Well, Dave, you're imparting great work and great insight and encouragement into young broadcasters, and you're still doing great work. And so I appreciate all that you are doing, and just keep doing what you're doing and keep up the great work.
Same with you. Keep making content, because this content, no one deletes it. We've got it saved for a long time. So
yeah.
Keep on doing it, Brian. Good to see you.
All right. Thanks for being on. Thanks, Dave.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Built for This. Be sure to follow Built for This on your favorite listening platform and share it with a friend. Join me on the next episode when I will share entertaining stories of inspiration, encouragement, and purpose-driven experiences. What are you built for? Built for This is produced and recorded by Heart Media DFW.